Hi, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of The New Unfiltered. Last week, I had on the founders of YC-backed fintech company, Alinea, and both of the founders went from working corporate jobs to starting companies. And I kind of like that theme for ongoing episodes and upcoming ones because I know so many of you are curious about personal branding and launching your own companies. So before I get into this episode, make sure to follow myself and The New Unfiltered on social media at the link in the show notes, as well as subscribe to my personal newsletter, Stay Fearless or Die Trying, that airs every single Saturday in your news inbox on your email and talks all about how to be fearless and how to build your own personal brand. So I have got a very special guest on the show today, Abigail Posner, who is the Director of US Creative Works at Google. Abigail and I connected quite a while ago. I can't even remember at one networking event. She probably doesn't even remember because I don't, but I have followed her work on LinkedIn and we've been connected for years. So I really want to go over with her today not only her advice for launching a company because she works with so many different ad agencies, but also for getting in the door at a company like Google. So Abigail, thank you so much for joining the show today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
You work as the director of Google's creative think tank for agencies and brands, which is fascinating. So for those, myself included, who are curious what is even included in that role, can you walk me through a day in your life?
Sure. I must have given you an old bio because actually we are focused way more on advertisers than we are on agencies at this point in time, but we used to focus on them. We work closely with advertisers and those who have agencies. We definitely partner with them as well, but the main focus is your large typical large advertisers, the folks you'd probably see on TV, they also spend a lot on YouTube. So those are our clients. And Creative Works is a team made up of sub teams, very similar to what you'd see in an advertising agency. So we have creative business partners who are the ones who connect very directly with our clients and with our internal sales folks, teams here at Google. We also have content architects. They happen to be experts in branded content and working with creators. We have creative effectiveness specialists. So they are expert at looking at ads, knowing how to make them, and branded content for that matter, and knowing how to make them that much more compelling, meaningful. And in some cases, they are even developing new ideas on top of those advertisements for our clients. We also have strategists who are similar to the folks you probably see in creative agencies. And what they do is they dive into all the various sources of data that we have to understand what motivates people and how to tell human stories from that, which will then help our clients develop really amazing ad experiences. We have producers, we have business analysts. So kind of your typical, the folks you'd probably imagine seeing in an advertising agency, we have here as well.
Oh my gosh, I've got so many questions. I just
Good.
launched. Yeah, I just launched a consulting business, and so many people are always talking about advertising and agencies and consulting. With the clients that you work with, what do you think they go to Google for? Like, why would they want to partner with you aside from just the name?
Well, our primary platform, the one that my team works on, is YouTube. So clients go to Google for many, many, many different needs, from measurement to very search oriented. They may go to Google for cloud services. I mean, it runs the gamut. So for my team, I'll speak on behalf of my team. We really focus on YouTube, and YouTube being the largest streaming platform in the universe, our clients want to be there. And so when we say they want to be there, they want to make advertising that will really penetrate the YouTube audience. They want to make branded content that leverages the tools and the creative canvas that is YouTube. They want to work closely with creators, since creators are such a huge component of the YouTube experience. So they come to our team to help them really understand how to leverage YouTube in the most effective, most powerful way possible. And because we have not just experience working on the platform, knowledge of the creators, knowledge of the trends, we also have huge sources of data that, and Google's known for their insights, right? So huge sources of data from which we can pull, whether it's YouTube data, Google data, from which we can source so many amazing insights to drive even more compelling messages to our largest advertisers, consumers.
So fascinating. With TikTok having made such a splash since COVID, it almost feels like short form content has really taken over the space. Now, when I started as a blogger back in 2011, YouTube and writing were the most traditional forms of media or personal branding. So while working at Google, what do you notice about people who are still putting ad dollars behind YouTube when they have something like TikTok that they can also compete with?
Well, YouTube has shorts as well. So luckily, we can provide a whole plethora of different formats. I mean, look, I believe in a big happy family, right? Like, yes, we compete, but we compete on a friendly level. I'm happy for all digital platforms to succeed. First, because I think we all learn from one another. It's great to have a competitive, prong in our butts moving us in a certain direction. Um, and I think that the more we can move our clients towards digital platforms in their totality, the better. That being said, there are differences. And again, TikTok has its role, but YouTube has its role. Now, you could claim, okay, well, TikTok is the shorts guy. And as I said, YouTube has shorts as well, but TikTok is very one dimensional, whereas YouTube has so many different ways to access content. First of all, you can access it across multiple screens. CTV being a huge one, though I feel like I'm going down this rabbit hole of selling you YouTube, which I'm not trying to do. But just suffice it to say that there is a lot of different ways to engage with the YouTube experience. It can be short form, it could be a little taste. And as I like to say, the shorts are a gateway to really digging in and deciding, well, I want to go deep and I want to really explore something. Also, we work side by side with Instagram and YouTube. If our clients have let's say, an awareness campaign and this happens quite a bit on Instagram or on TikTok, rather, we can help ensure that there is consistency across the multitude of platforms that audiences engage with, so that they feel like they're moving from one experience to another without feeling too much of a blip in the process. So we understand that clients like to use many different sources of content. And so we play with them if we need to, but we also feel like we have our special sauce as well.
I am so glad that you actually talk about shorts because I have noticed such a good amount of traction from the videos that I've posted. Now, since you're in the space, you probably know even more about this than I do, but is there like a trick or a rule to going viral or getting your messages out there? I kind of dabbled earlier last year in doing a lot more long form content on YouTube, and it really was taking up so much of my time to do it right. So unfortunately, I ended up pretty much stopping for a bit. And now I just do the shorts. But I'm curious, kind of a two-part question, but in the sense of how much time should you be attributing to YouTube if you really want to make it into something? And then what about for getting the most attraction for those shorts?
I'll be very honest with you. I'm not the expert. The expert are the teams that I get to manage. So if you had more specific questions, I would definitely defer to
Yeah.
them. And or there are plenty of YouTube articles on the topic. That being said, look, it all depends on what is it that you're trying to convey. At what point in the funnel are you stationed, if you will? Are you trying to build awareness? Are you trying to build consideration? Are you trying to build more direct action, right? So depending on where you are in that funnel, you may decide that short form or long form works better. What we have found, for example, for many, and by the way, it also depends on the category in which you're in. So, for example, like if you're pharma and you're really trying to build consideration, everybody knows Zyrtec, everybody knows Claritin, for example, but do you really know what it's about? And so here's where long form is actually going to be quite helpful in the consideration phase. Oh, and by the way, it's not a fun topic to talk about, but when you bring in creators, it makes it more fun. So my point is there are so many dimensions to what will work depending on the category, depending on the business need, and also depending on the particular you know, objective you're trying to reach. And again, I am sure that there are going to be much smarter people out there who can tell you, today, what is the best way to tell the message you're trying to tell in terms of platform, in terms of length of asset, and also in terms of vertical versus horizontal. So that's a whole other, discussion to have. So yeah, I'm not trying to hedge. I'm just trying to say it's not a one answer to say, to cover all the questions.
No, for sure. And even when I asked the question, I knew that you were going to say you're not the right person because it's a bit out of your wheelhouse. And I think a lot of people don't realize, number one, at those larger companies and agencies, there is so many people working on so many different elements of it. Something that's also really cool is that you've done a lot in the space of like leadership and emotional relationships with the digital space. Now, in this day and age with technology, there is such a negative connotation between how much, especially these young people, how much time they spend on social media and how addicted they are to their phones. So at Google and then in your personal life, how do you create a strategy for that work-life balance?
When you say a work-life balance for myself or for my children,
All
or
of the
how
above.
do I all of the above? I I My children are now between the ages of 22 and 18. So I pretty much don't have say over how they use their technology, devices. But I never really had a I never really had a rule for them. I didn't go in and I didn't, even when they were younger, I didn't put any um, blockers. And I had some basic rules because they had to go to bed at night. They had to do their homework, right? It's not like in the old days when I grew up, the TV was in the living room and there was a big distance between where the TV was and where my bedroom was. Now there's no difference, right? Like the same screen that you use to chat with your buddies, you could be using for research, you could be using to watch content. So it's a harder challenge that I think we had when we were growing up. But I really don't, as much as, and maybe you could argue because I work in technology, but I am not as fearful, nor am I as disdainful of our digital devices as I think a lot of the world is. Uh, Look, I think there are harmful things on devices, and there are very helpful things on devices. And I really just try to teach myself and my children to look out for that. But I think to vilify technology is a losing battle. And the way to make it work is just to uh, really support your friends, yourself, your children, to engage in the right kinds of content and to consider the content that they're watching in a um, more judicious way. So I'll give you an example. My son, my oldest, he's 22. My son, when he was younger, loved hip hop, and he would um, watch a lot of videos on the history of hip hop, and he would watch a lot of hip hop videos themselves. And I said to him, "Look, Elijah, I don't mind you listening to the music. I really don't. What I don't love is the depiction of women in those videos." And that was it. And he heard what I had to say and he registered it. I didn't say you can't watch the videos. That's a losing battle. But I told him I don't love how women are depicted. And so that's what we need to do is give ourselves, I think there should be guardrails. I'm not saying there should not be some filtering and some guardrails, no question. But at the same time, I think we also have agency. And I think we should try to give ourselves some agency and give that to our children and our relatives and communities so that they also can be more discerning themselves.
Super important. That's what it comes down to, right? And I think from both the parent side, but also from the tech side, as I don't think that these platforms in particular were created to be as negative as they've become. I don't know if you watched I think it was The Social Network, the Netflix documentary.
Yeah, I mean, of course, look, there's going to be every dystopian show out there you want on technology, right? It sells.
Mm-hmm.
And look, I do a show, I have a podcast on culture and on technology and the role that technology plays on culture. In some cases, it can be bad, but in many cases, what people don't realize is how good it can be and how much agency we have with our technology to reimagine it and use it for very, very useful purposes, purposes that probably the engineers didn't even think. What sells is negative shit, right? And
Yeah.
so people like to push the negativity. It's dramatic. It's look at the news feeds, right? It's dramatic, it sells, it's scary. We are from, when we were Cro-Magnon men, we are trained to watch out for that which we fear. And so that is part of the issue here is we don't
Mm-hmm.
always look at the good side of it. Now, that being said, do I think there should be guardrails? Do I think there should be um, you know, some oversight? Absolutely. Just like I think there should be oversight on so much of the technology that has been developed over the course of time. Look, fire is technology, and we cannot live without it. It provides us light, it provides us heat, it allows us to melt metal so we can use that metal. It allows us to cook. I mean, it goes on and on and on. But you also can't start a fire somewhere just haphazardly, right? There are guardrails, there are
Mm-hmm.
rules, because if you don't follow those rules, you have a total catastrophe in a forest. You have a forest fire. Should we shut down all fire? Should we say fire is bad? Right? So, I mean, every technology, it is in our nature as human beings to develop technology because we are built to progress. And so the question we should be asking ourselves is, are we building it for good? And how do we ensure that the bad dudes, because there's always going to be bad dudes, have as much blockage to using it for bad as we can? But I mean, same thing with the printing press, right? The printing press changed the world forever. We could read. To create a society that could read has changed us forever. Can you use the printing press to print really bad shit? Of course.
Mm-hmm.
Propaganda. Hitler had tons of propaganda printed on a printing press. Does that mean we should then do away with the printing press? So we just have, as a
I love it.
society, has to lean in and take some ownership of our behavior, as well as have a collective responsibility on how we want the technology to evolve and be used over time.
So true. And for parents as well. And I know you said that you are a parent, so it's always really nice to connect to somebody who's not only in the space, but also has kids because you have such a good relative healthy perspective on social media. And I really appreciate what you said is like people don't realize how this content was solely really created to draw you in. So you do have to be very careful, whether that's muting what you see online, whether that's, the minute you feel uncomfortable about something, actually leaning into that. But I do want to ask you about getting the job at Google because you've also got so many entrepreneurial initiatives behind you, Abigail, which is incredible. So you've kind of done the personal brand while simultaneously working at a large company like Google. Did you ever think about only doing like the Abigail Posner, that brand, and leaving that corporate job to do solely entrepreneurship?
I have. I would say I thought about it lightly. Um, and the reason for that is everything is going well. I'm not saying everything is perfect, but I have enough um, time and expectation, quite frankly, on me working at Google to have more side hustles. Like there is an expectation, especially at the senior levels, that you do develop a brand, that you're going to have connections with outside worlds, like being on a board. So, for example, I'm a member of the board of directors of a public company. That's very expected. Um, I'm expected to have a point of view on things. So, in a way, it's part of my job description. Um, in some cases, it can be overwhelming because I do have a day job and I have to kind of pick and choose my moments where I lean into the to work 150%, or kind of lean out a little bit. Like last week, I took 2 days off and did a paid speech in Orlando, right? So I figure out how to make it work. So for now, I have the best of both worlds, and I think that the opportunity for anyone who is looking to straddle both is to find a corporate gig where that kind of external presence is welcomed. I'm not saying it's always been easy. I'm not saying it's, I don't get a few slaps on the wrist if I go somewhere, or do something that may seem a little bit off the reservation, or off kind of like, you know, maybe can be in conflict with Google. Like you have to play that smartly. But for the most part, it's actually worked. And I, for now, get a lot of new experiences, new fodder, new relationships, um, new doors opening because I'm at Google. So until I find that I am being more constrained than I am being expansive, then I'll really consider getting out of corporate and going straight on my own. But I like
Those
it
are
all.
some,
I'm selfish.
oh my gosh, as you should be. Those are some really good words that you use in there. I also appreciate that you say like you're selfish, even though you're not selfish in the way that people think about selfish. But you can have both, and you truly have proven that. When you were going through the process at Google, anything in particular that you remember thinking like, oh my gosh, I wish I had practiced more for this, for or thought more about this before going into the job interview, for anyone who's looking to get a job as high level as you are at?
It's funny. I did not, I don't know if this was smart or stupid. I really don't know. I did not prepare very well for my interviews. And I kick myself because I'm like, shit. At the time, I was like, I should have probably prepared more. I think I was a little, I thought I was hot shit and I can, or I just didn't take it seriously. I don't even remember. But but honestly, maybe that was the best thing, that I didn't over prepare, right? Because I had to think on the spot, and it didn't bother me that I had to think on the spot in that, like, oh shit, I prepared this whole other thing and now I have to scrap that. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna have to think on the spot no matter what because I didn't prepare. So I'm not advising folks don't prepare. That's not what I'm saying. But the type of interviews that you do at a place like Google, and I can't speak for other companies, but generally the tech companies kind of follow the same path. Usually something that started at Google tends to then make its way to Facebook and TikTok and all those others, because a lot of people left Google to go to those places. So my advice is, like, be somewhat prepared in terms of know the industry that you're looking at, or know the latest innovations that Google's coming out with. But for the most part, you're going to be asked very intellectual questions. And so you have to be able to think on your feet. You have to be able to source from past experience to answer questions that you're just not going to be prepared for. And that's a good
Just
thing.
yeah, and I think, and I've never really worked for a corporate job besides this Radio Disney show that I had, so my experience is certainly different. But
Mhm.
I even remember when I went in there having made the show and like put it out in front of people on my own, that you can never be fully prepared for any type of interview. But I think what you can be prepared is what you know that you like, what you're good at, what you're not. Is that something that you would agree with?
Yes. Again, if you were to look at the way I interviewed for this role 12 and a half years ago, I don't think that I necessarily showed up the way that I would recommend others show up. Um, so it is kind of a miracle. I don't know how I got the job, but I would say so based off of what I've done a lot of interviewing for folks. So based off of what I have seen as successful is it's a combination of just knowing your stories really cold, and knowing how you are, what when I say your stories, I mean either your experiences that you can call from, and your story with capital S, like why you, what makes you unique, what is your point of view on the world, what is your point of view on the industry, what is your point of view on, with it, whatever it is. If you're going for a job to sell gum, I'm just looking, there's gum on my desk, what is your point of view on human beings, on gum chewing, on working, right? So just to have a perspective, I think is very important. So having that in your back pocket, having a couple of experiences you can call from. And then I think the final thing, and people forget this, is make sure you have results for what you're talking about,
Oh,
especially in a
that's
big
so good.
corporate environment. Yeah.
Yeah, how would you show those results, especially if you're like right out of college and going to your first job interview?
Uh, when you're right out, you have results from everything you do. You may have had a summer job. There's results from that. Maybe you wrote a thesis in college. There are results from that. Maybe you did an awesome research project. There are going to be results from that. Um, what is very important, and it's something that will get drilled into someone when they go into corporate America, is there's a difference between activities and outcomes. And the activities are great, but they could be meaningless if you don't have an outcome associated with it. So make sure you have results. Again, it could be I'm a babysitter. What's yours? What is the results of how great a babysitter you were? I managed to babysit for a family for 5 years. I was recommended to 3 other families to babysit. I turned it into a little side hustle where I brought in other friends, and they would make money, and it became you know a great resource for the whole community. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do. And I always appreciate when somebody says something like this because it's thinking outside the box. I also always tell people, especially if they're young, because they'll ask me, like, oh, especially if they want to be an influencer or social media personality. I don't have any experience with brands, or I've never done this before. What do I show? And it's so funny to me because I always say, like, you have something, you have an internship that you did when you were younger, or you've spoken to somebody. Like, you don't have to think so outside of the box in a way to get that kind of an opportunity or tell somebody in person what sets you apart. Um, so I just think that's great. What about my last question for you, Abigail, is on the personal branding topic, doing that while you're at a corporate company. How have you found that you can manage both and also not feel like you're stepping on anyone's toes? I asked that because I spoke to a former CMO at Canada Goose a few months ago, and she left to pursue her own brand. And she had said specifically she didn't want to start that when she was at Google because of potentially kind of stepping on anyone's toes there. So I'm curious what your thoughts on that would be.
Stepping on toes. I don't really feel like that's ever a challenge. I think the challenge is more like, am I being consistent with the messages that are also being conveyed by the company?
And
So
how do
that's
you, I think for her, it was more like she didn't want anyone to think there that she was doing something at the same time as working such a high powered role.
yeah, no, I have made it clear from day one that I do these things, and so that was helpful. Like I made it somewhat contingent on the job. Like that at the time I had a blog that I was very passionate about. It was a beauty blog. And so let them know, hey, this is what I'm doing. And they were cool. Again, it's like, I think you have to gauge the company and their willingness to allow for this.
Yeah.
I think most companies now expect folks to have side hustles. I think that is kind of, especially very successful companies, they know they need to attract top talent, and top talent are going to do side hustles. They're going to be, working with companies on the side. They're going to be having a big social media presence. In some cases, they want it. I mean, my manager, he knows I do this stuff, and he likes it because he knows it gives me energy. Does it conflict? Do I ever step out of my job in times and in cases where I needed to be there because I was doing side hustles? No, right? That's why I take my vacation to do it. So it's just a matter of being organized and just making sure your company's open for that.
Do you think also that it's an idea to present those ideas that you have for your own, say, personal brand at a job interview? Like nowadays, so many of these young people are
No,
going into
I
no.
no, no. I
Okay.
would wait. I would wait. I mean, once they are interested in you, then you would say, "Look, these are the kinds of things I also like to do, and I want to make sure I'm still, that's still acceptable." Look, Google has a whole ethics and compliance department so that folks like me, and there are many folks like me, can go and say, "Hey, I'm working in, I'm going to join this board," or "Hey, I am going to publish an article," or "Hey, I'm going to I'm going to be represented by a speaking agency," and they'll say, "Cool, like give me more information," and then they'll let you they'll judge it for you, and then you, for 99% of the cases, unless it's totally conflicting with Google's business, and they're cool with it. So it's, I think, more acceptable now, but again, I would not bring it up day one, not because I think it's a bad thing, but not unnaturally bring it up is my
Sure.
point.
No, so fascinating. I really appreciate you saying that. And I would love for you to wrap this up with where everyone can find you on social media and connect with you online to stay in touch.
Great. Yeah. I mean, love for anyone to reach out on LinkedIn. Certainly, you can find me on IG, Instagram. I'm also on TikTok. Mostly, I would say less so on TikTok, but definitely Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. The usual suspects. I'm there.